high atop the pastoral center of the Diocese of Camden, you're listening to Talking Catholic.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Talking Catholic. I'm Jen Mauro, and with me today is Mike Walsh.
I have a bone to pick with you.
Oh, no.
I've been waiting for this podcast to lay into you about something.
Oh, no.
Yeah, you're cheating on me.
Can you...
It's
true, I am.
You now have another radio show on domestic church media with some woman that you somehow got her into the podcast door, and then suddenly you two have a radio show together. I feel like I've been played.
No.
Yeah, that's what I thought. What is your radio show called?
Well, you are correct. We do have a new show. It is a monthly show, though, not weekly like Talking Catholic. It's called Better Together, and it is with myself and Emily Italia, who is a freelance journalist for the Diocese of Trenton. So the Diocese of Trenton and Camden coming together unofficially just to talk about how we're better together. Now, when we came up with that name, Mike, I didn't tell you.
Yeah, you hid it from me.
I hid that, yes, because I thought Mike will throw up in his mouth. Well,
I can tell you when I actually saw it, my eyes did roll.
Oh yeah, so that's another thing. It's videoed, so and up on YouTube on domestic church media.
Is it on YouTube? I know it's on their Facebook page.
It's on YouTube.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yes.
Got both.
But I'm not used to being filmed like that, so it's when you and I talk, we're just talking and waving hands around or whatever. I'm taking notes, but Emily and I get to record in the domestic church media station with Jim Manfredonia, which is very exciting. Mm-hmm. And then there's a tiny camera staring at you, and I have to feel like I have to smile all the time, even if I'm not talking about something that's a smiling subject. It's very disconcerting.
Yes.
Disconcerting.
Well, look at that. Yeah, that was the other part that was a surprise, was not only did I not know the title, I did know that it was going to happen, but when I'm just scrolling through Facebook one day and there was this pseudo live broadcast of Jen Mauro in my eye holes as I am as I'm looking at Facebook trying to relax in my home, and they're like, what is going on? And then I realized, it's also being recorded for video. That's awesome. That's so wonderful.
Look, listeners, Jim Manfredonia was very nice, and he asked Emily and I if we wanted to work on something together. And Mr. Walsh graciously.
I don't do anything.
I don't know
gracefully.
if it was grateful.
Yeah.
Graceful. Gracefully said, "Sure, Jen. If that's something you think that you have time to do with all of your many responsibilities here in the Diocese of Camden, go for it."
Yes.
But it's really cool. I mean, we've done one show so far, and it was on Respect Life Month, and we'll have one coming up in November. But the whole idea of Better Together is hopefully being able to talk to those across the entire state about issues that make us better people. Of course, Catholic, but also maybe bring in some ecumenical events or talk speakers.
Mm-hmm.
One of the women who were on our show last month was a Christian woman who runs a center to help women who are pregnant. So, and then we also talked to Deacon Jerry from the Diocese of Camden and Rachel Hendricks from the Diocese of Trenton. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You were giving me like the snarkiest look right now.
I wanted to see if you were going to attempt to say Deacon Jerry's last name.
Jablanowski.
Wow. But that one you get right?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I've been practicing.
Well, now that you're a professional. You're a real professional
I know.
podcaster.
Do you know how, I was actually really nervous about pronouncing the names. Like here on Talking Catholic, it's kind of a joke, but it's the big times now, Mike. I can't mess around.
I know. There's people are not going to. That's so for dear listeners, if you're interested in hearing this show, it's just like ours with a lot less sarcasm and humor. So, that's what but it's good. They're very devout, and some might say almost saccharine in their desire to spread the word and good works of people in the state of New Jersey.
It was hard to be like super jovial at the beginning of that one too, because like we were talking about Respect Life. It's kind of a serious topic, and
since when is life not joyful?
Yeah, that's true.
Thanks.
I think I just panicked.
That sounds more like it.
What did he say yesterday? I have a rat's nest for a mind.
I wasn't going to put that on tape, but if you want to you want to call yourself for that, that's fine. I'm cool with that.
I have no secrets from our listeners. Just kidding. Moving on.
I was about to say, you don't want me unloading everything about what it's like to work in the Diocese of Camden and the Catholic Star Herald. But yes, that is going on, and I am very happy that you're getting this opportunity, and certainly working with Domestic Church Media has been great for this podcast, so having another voice on there more frequently, certainly not a bad thing.
Well, thank you, Mike.
Sure. But just remember, you're now my competitor, and we will destroy you. That is the goal now. So there's that. And then coming up in South Jersey, but it's open to everybody. Philadelphia, the rest of New Jersey, Delaware, if you're interested. Man Up South Jersey is popping up on Veterans Day this year. It's a veterans-themed Man Up South Jersey, which is a men's spirituality conference. It's I believe it's the fifth annual.
Fifth annual. It'll be held at Paul VI High School.
He's a saint.
In Haddonfield. And I believe it starts at 7:30, but I think it starts with Mass at 7.
Right. So Mass begins at that high school has a parish church in its parking lot, which is kind of nice. So it's at St. Vincent Pallotti Church in Haddonfield, St. Joseph the Worker Parish. And but then the conference is actually in Paul VI, and Paul VI has hosted for the last 5 years, and they know how to put together an event. Plus, there's great food, really good speakers, and you're done and out of there by 3:00.
The speakers do look pretty solid.
Yeah, it's like a major general that's going to be there, and a
chaplain. I believe it's a Navy chaplain.
Yeah, Navy chaplain.
He's been a priest for a long time, 30 plus years.
Yeah, Navy captain, I believe. A well-known Catholic speaker, a deacon whose name escapes me at the moment. Yeah, I feel sorry, sir. I apologize for not. I don't have my notes in front of me, or else I'd say your name. And then all the usual goofiness of the folks that run the show. So you'll see. Well, Deacon CEO is a character, and Joe DeFilippo is a character, and all the people who are a part of it are good, decent men who also have a good deal of personality to them. So it's always a fun event.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, I know. That's why I refuse to go on the stage. I don't want to join up with other funny people.
It should be great, though.
Yeah.
I hope they have a good turnout.
So if you want to learn more about it, go to manupsouthjersey.com and check it out. And the tickets are reasonable. And but most importantly, everybody, the food is great. It really is. Paul VI puts out a great spread. So it's nice. And then, so we always get this question, well, when are you going to do a women's conference? Well,
I'm sorry, how was that again?
When are you going to do a women's conference?
I really wish we had the video for that, because the face was outstanding.
I know. I've heard that phrase many a time. It's like, man, the only reason the men's conference exists is because the men got together and decided to do one. And we were like, sure, we'll help you out. There was an attempt a couple of years ago to put together a women's conference, and then COVID hit, and it blew everything apart. We were just talking earlier that I hear rumors that there'll be another one being put together for in the next year or two. So hopefully we'll get that out together too, because we do not want to not give the women folk an opportunity to come together in a spiritual nature. I just hope that the food will be as good.
Well, if it's at Paul VI, then food will be good, right?
Well, you know what? I'm kind of weird about that. I like to see things put all over the place. So, okay, the boys got PVI. Let's find an even better place for the women.
I vote for the Shore.
I suspected you might say that. And hey, listen, maybe Holy Spirit High School. I've never seen Holy Spirit High School spread, but maybe we can get them to set it up. I know their auditorium is great, so
cool.
That's nice. But yes, so Man Up South Jersey is coming soon, and if you're interested, if there's a man in your life that you think ought to go, or if you yourself are a man and should get your derriere over there, could benefit from it. I've never met anyone who's been to it who didn't say that they got something out of it.
Yeah, it's
whatever
close.
I was trying to say.
Close.
Everybody got something out of it.
You know what I like though is also I know a lot of like families who will go, like a father and a son, or a father, son, and a grandfather. So definitely bring your family, bring your friends.
Sure. Yeah, if you go as a group, it's even more fun.
Yeah. So we have a special guest with us today, one of our favorite guests.
Yeah, who's a little confused as to why he's been invited, but that doesn't matter because he can talk about literally any subject, because we have the chancellor of the Diocese of Camden, Father Jason Rocks, with us today.
Oh, I should say something.
Hey, whenever you feel like it.
Sorry.
You can ramble on like the rest of us.
Loss of words. It's good to be back. It's always a joy to be here in the vault.
Yeah.
And to talk all things Catholic with everyone, and hopefully it's a productive conversation today.
And I'll just, it's just a little promo while everyone's still listening. I'll also let you know, Father Rox will be coming back in a couple of weeks to talk about a very special topic that I'm willing to bet most people don't know about. Because I didn't know about it until I came to work for the diocese.
Are we going to say the topic?
Sure. It's soon. We are going to have the consecration of a virgin in the diocese, and she will then be a consecrated virgin. I won't tell you any more than that because I want you to listen in. But it's sort of a fascinating tale, and we've actually had a consecrated virgin on the podcast a long time ago. But this is going to be sort of a different perspective on it.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too.
I want to learn more about it.
Me too. Because I can literally tell you I know nothing now.
Yeah, I don't know much about it either.
I cannot wait till Father Rox is back and tell us everything about.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
But today, we're here to talk about...
Death.
No, but we're here to talk about, November's coming up and the month of remembrance, so to speak. And we have All Souls Day and All Saints Day on November 1st and 2nd. So we thought we'd have Father Rox here to talk about that, and also, our Catholic belief when it comes to burial rites and funerals. So,
sure.
Yeah, I said that so sad, but
that's okay. We should remember first we celebrate All Saints Day on the 1st, and that grows out of one of the popes. I forget which one now. He just kind of thought that we weren't really taking the celebration of the saints seriously enough. That we weren't really having festivals and really commemorating them and gathering as a community and allowing that memory of the saints to become a lived reality in the lives of the faithful. So there began the commemoration of all saints, known and unknown, on this day, because there's many saints that we do not know, but we are certain are in heaven, we would say, right? And these saints are martyrs. The martyrs are really the first group of saints to be venerated for their faith and their ardent faith, in the sense that they gave their very lives for their faith. Nothing would compromise that. And then confessors would be another group that we don't talk about enough. These are people who suffered in some way for the faith, although did not have their lives taken from them, but they suffered in many ways, persecuted in one way or another. We even have, I think, a few priests in our diocese who are probably confessors coming from some of the communist regimes.
Yeah.
oh, wow.
They wouldn't think themselves that way, but that's really what they would be, because they suffered because of the faith. And then we have all the men and women who would just lived a life of profound holiness, full of the virtues, really living the gifts, really producing the fruits of the Spirit in their lives. And these people manifest the glory of God, right? And there's a priest that we had in professor in Newark. For a while, he had to live at the Basilica, and he said one of the things you'd have to do down there is they would ring, and people would come, and you'd have to go give them a tour. And he kind of dreaded it. Even though he was probably very good, he was a very good communicator, and he would walk around, well, this is this, and that is that, and this date is important, and blah, blah, blah. And he was talking about the beautiful stained glass windows, and they're multicolored and all this stuff. And some kid blurted out, the saints let the light of God come through, right? Mm. They allow the glory of God to come through in all of its splendor, right? All of it's color even, right? That's who the saints are. Mm. And so when we honor the saints, we're really honoring God who gave them that grace. And honoring them, we also our spirit should stir within us, and we should be roused, like, I can do that, right? Mm-hmm. So we think of somebody like St. Ignatius of Loyola. His story is really cool because he got wounded. He wanted to just be a soldier, wanted to be like all the other guys. He was kind of mediocre in his faith. I know the Jesuits are going to come after me now, but that's okay. Bring it on. But as he was recuperating, they didn't have any of the books he really wanted to read, which have been about knight errands and things like that, and romances. They had a life of Christ and a book of the saints. And as he began to read, particularly the lives of the saints, he was like, well, if Francis did that, why can't I? Mm-hmm. Right? And that was a part of his whole founding of a community and really the proclamation of the gospel, to bring people back into the union with the church and really live out their baptism, right? Mm-hmm. To really become, as St. Paul writes so often, we'll translate it the holy ones, but it's the saints, mm-hmm. right? We say that in the Apostles' Creed, right? I believe in the communion of saints, right? Well, we're the communion of saints. It begins with baptism. And so we put the saints forward to inspire us to really live our faith and to bear witness to Jesus, to really become that stained glass window, so to speak, that allows the glory of God to shine through. And the glory of God always attracts other people, right? So the saints attract others to come to know the Lord and to really seek out that holiness, to seek out union with Him. Yeah. So we put the saints there, and we should remember that. Celebrate All Saints' Day. Get to know the saints. Let them be real, because they are. Let them become friends. Really let them really be true companions with you. Realize that they exist. So it's not like reading. Maybe you like to read, Star Wars novels, and you get all excited, like, oh, Darth Vader or Darth Bane or something like that.
Say more.
They're not really real in the sense that St. Francis or St. Clare, or any of the saints. And so really get to know them and imitate them. Not that you're going to do everything. Not everyone's going to be a Francis or a Ignatius. But you can still be inspired by them to strive to live that holy life, to know the love of God in your life and to live by that love. That's ultimately what the saints are. Mm-hmm. They live by the love of God.
I'm curious. I'm going to ask you a question that I hate to get, and I apologize for giving it to you. But I'm going to give it to you because it's something you said. Are there any saints? I won't ask you if you have a devotion to any of these saints, but are there any saints that over the years you've found yourself particularly close to?
Sure. Like I like Saint Thomas Aquinas and Saint Dominic. Both now. Dominic is of course the founder of the Order of Preachers, but he like Saint Francis saw a need and began to bring about a reform. And for Dominic, it was a matter of really prayer and preaching and allowing that preaching to be teaching, but allowing prayer to really penetrate the hearts of the listeners, right? St. Thomas followed that way and truly shared what he contemplated, right? Yeah. And so we strive to follow that example. So I follow them. Other saints, that are, I always think of Moses the Black. Moses the Black was a thief. He was a marauder. He probably killed people, and was wanted by the law. This is this is early centuries of Christianity. And to hide from the law officials, he hid amongst the monks in the desert. And the monks knew he wasn't a monk, but their piety was such that they just accepted him. Yeah. And their witness and their example brought about a conversion where he became Christian and became an example. Like other monks followed his way, right? So he's an interesting story because there's somebody who certainly lived a wild life, was a terrible person, but then became a very good Christian man. So these are the saints that kind of inspire me. And even in his biography, they'll say, he was just a tough and rugged even individual. And I'm pretty sure it could be his story that he came back and somebody was robbing him and he just helped the person take all of his stuff.
Oh, wow.
That's a complete conversion, that we're talking about. And if it isn't him, that is something he would have done. As we're earlier, he would have killed the guy and taken all of his stuff. Yeah. Right. So you see these saints that are just remarkable.
And that's St. Moses the Black?
St. Moses the Black is what he's known as.
Make a note of that. I've never heard of him before.
Yeah, so there's all sorts of little saints out there that we don't know about. I often think of, I always forget her name, the young girl that just wanted to receive communion. And she eventually wound up in a convent. She's still really young. Finally came to the age where they said, okay, we can let her receive. And as soon as she received communion, she died. Oh, wow. And I often think of her. She was overwhelmed with just the immensity of who she had just received. She had received her spouse, in a sense, right? Mm-hmm. Her love. And to kind of, I think about that, how am I when I receive communion? Am I just lukewarm? Do I really take that time to really think this is Jesus, which is what I was taught when I was in second grade.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
What about you, Jen? You got any saints that you have a particular fondness for or devotion to?
Well, yeah, the little flower, Saint Teresa of Lisieux. I like her a lot. That she's one of the ones that I learned about when I was coming into the Catholic faith. But I also, especially maybe because of our jobs, or maybe just because of my rat's nest mind, I always think about Saint Stephen, because I think about Stephen in the Bible, when he didn't think he'd have the words to defend himself, and God was, saying, I'll give you the words, don't worry about that. I always feel like I don't have the right words to use, and so I often ask for the intercession to give me the words. Mainly when I'm speaking, because I think we all know I'm not the best speaker. I'm a better writer, but definitely those two.
Oh, actually, that's a great reminder. Thanks for that reminder. Dear listeners, on November 17th, I encourage you to attend the Catholic Business Network function at Holy Family Parish, starting at 8 a.m., goes to about 9 a.m. or 10 a.m., where one Jennifer Mauro will be the guest speaker that day. I apologize for not putting this in the promos for, but the Catholic Business Network of South Jersey, you're going to be the presenter.
So Saint Stephen, be with me on that day.
By the way, why don't you pray to him before the podcast?
Thanks.
Okay, just checking.
How do you know I don't? Because it's not working?
Well,
no.
He's a better saint than that.
I use him I only pull out the big guns when needed.
Okay.
What about you?
What about me?
What about you and saints?
I've actually never had much of a connection to the saints, to be honest with you. Over the years that I've worked here, I've developed an appreciation for. Well, I'm gonna have to look up St. Moses the Black, because he definitely seems right in my line of thinking. But I've always been a fan of what I would consider one of the better sinners amongst us, St. Augustine, and sort of how he went from a guy who was very hedonistic and then became a great bishop and theologian, and then St. Catherine of Siena is another one that I have an appreciation for. Trying to get the papacy right. There's a part of that I have an appreciation for. But otherwise, St. Luke, I like the fact that he was a writer for the Gentiles. He was the person who was trying to move the faith from a Judeo-Christian into the great wide world. So I had an appreciation for that. Although that does actually tie back into Star Wars and the fact that that was the early 80s, and at that point lightsabers were around, and I was a big fan of Luke and Luke Skywalker, and there was a connection to St. Luke that way.
Is there a cool video of you with a lightsaber or something?
No, but he is.
Oh my goodness.
He is my confirmation name, and I'm not saying that it was necessarily 100% for him, but
I'm surprised your son's not named Luke now that I think about it.
Well, he chose St. Stephen. I'm sorry.
I mean his real name.
No, he was named after my dad. The only saintly person I actually know, my father. But St. Stephen is the patron saint of athletes, right?
Oh, I don't know about that. I just I just talk to him when I need speaking help.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's a good way to put it. I speak to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's not crazy.
No.
Well, I'm glad that I'm glad, Mike, that you asked Father Rox that question, because,
Thank you.
I think that especially, I think the way you described the saints was beautiful, about the idea of, letting God in, letting the sun shine through. I think it's easy to teach children about the saints, and they love the saints, right? Like, everybody loves St. Francis with the animals,
right.
But as we get older, maybe it's our... Use your words.
St. Stephen.
St. Stephen, use your words. Hardness to life, but maybe sometimes we forget about the saints.
We can. I think it's easy to get distracted, or not to really take them as an example, because sometimes they seem so distant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons so many of the saints that John Paul II did canonize and beatified were really closer to our age. and because he wanted to remind people, like, no, look to them as to how to live as a Christian, and read their biographies and stuff like that. So as a kid, I always heard of Padre Pio. My dad always talked about him and stuff like that, and to finally actually make my way there to Petrolina and to see him, and to really see where he lived and how he was, it was just, it fills it out, and it's more than just a picture or a little brief summary. You get to really see a life, and you go back to what Ignatius said. Just, if they can do it, why can't I?
Yeah.
And maybe maybe we're not going to do the things that they did. Some of the things that the saints did are really incredible. Those are special graces. But a certain amount of growing in God's grace, growing in His love and union with Him, and living a particular way, living by the gifts and really producing the fruits, that's open to everybody.
Yeah.
So, when we think of the saints and we think of holiness, we should really think of St. Augustine. As you said, his first sermon as a bishop to the people of Hippo was on the Beatitudes and the Sermon on the Mount. And his preaching was for everybody. It wasn't just for the priest or those that would have been in the religious life. It was for the entire congregation, all those that made up the faithful in Hippo. And we can kind of forget that the Beatitudes, living a life of holiness, that's not just for people who live in a convent. It's for everybody, right? And that even Francis de Sales, the introduction to the devout life, again, that was written to a laywoman. That's what that was about, how to live the devout life, or that life where you're devoted, or you render your will easily moved to the will of another, in this case to God, right? All of us are called to that, each in the state that we're in. And that's different for everybody,
right?
In terms of what we can do, but also what our obligations would be. But for people who live in the world, part of being holy is putting in a proper day's work, right? How you comport yourself at work. For those who are married, fulfilling the obligations as a spouse or as a parent. These are part of what make us to be holy, right? Doing these things, but with the Spirit of God and infusing everything with the Spirit of God. So holiness really just consists of, in sanctity, being in union with God, being filled with the love of God, and really living by that love, right? So that you think of the words of St. Paul, it's not I who live, but Christ who lives in me, right?
Yeah.
So in addition...
I'm sorry, not to interrupt, but you know how everyone has to ask permission of me if they can go on to various media shows and stuff like that?
Yeah.
You're not allowed to have Father Rocks.
I'm asking Father Rocks. I'm going to ask him, but not to talk about this. Father Rocks is great. Everybody needs to be
I know.
Introduced to Father Rocks.
They can come to the podcast to find them. I'm sorry. Did you have more on the saints that you wanted to address?
No, I just wanted to say right after that we have All Souls Day, and just briefly touch on that
All
before we
Souls
talk
Days,
about
sure.
funeral rites. But.
Sure. So All Souls Day really starts in the monasteries. They would, someday during the year, they would just have a day where they remembered all their deceased members. And over time, as monasteries began to branch out, you'd have a mother house and you might have these daughter houses or sister houses. They began to pray for each other on those days they're deceased. They would incorporate that on the same day. And then with the Cluny Reform, so somewhere around, I think, the year 1000, which brought about a great monastic reform in Europe, that became more of a practice in many of the various monasteries and convents to offer a mass or to have a day of recollection to commemorate the members who had deceased. Eventually, the day came into be set sometime in November, usually because monks would take on a really hard, prolonged Advent, almost like a Lent, to prepare for Christmas. So it would start, some of them started in the middle of November. And so just prior to that, they began to have this day because it was probably also a day of prayer and fasting. So it wasn't like All Saints Day, let's party. All Souls Day, let's be somber and be a little bit more penitential. And eventually it moved to the second, just as eventually, the All Saints Day, which was commemorated differently, different places, finally became settled on the 1st of November. And so this is a day that we remember our faithful departed, whether we know them or not. But we begin always with the people that we know. Mm-hmm. We offer prayers, we offer masses. Priests are allowed to say 3 masses that day. And the reason we do this is because we understand that we can die and maybe not be ready to pass right into the beatific vision. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right? To really behold God and to really participate in that life. And so we might have like the residue of sin on us, right? And so if you go back to that stained glass image, right? If we get dirt on the stained glass, it hinders the light to shine in. Mm-hmm. So we can leave sometimes earth with the residue of sin. And here, a simple way to understand is to think of, rather than being consumed with the love of God, we're still holding on to maybe some lesser loves that hinder us from really loving God completely. So we see other things that are actually lesser goods as almost a better good or more desirable good than the good that is God. Yeah. Right? And so when we pass, we know from the Beatitude, blessed are the pure of heart, they shall see God, right? So we need to be purified. And even some of our Protestant brothers and sisters have pondered on that, thought, that might actually be a real thing. Yeah. To be able, there be some type of purification that would take place after death, so that we can enter into the mystery of God in a completer way or a more complete way. And so when we look at the second book of Maccabees, we hear about the soldiers that died, and they all were wearing an amulet of an idol. And so what do we do with these guys? And Judas Maccabeus took up a collection to have sacrifices offered on their behalf in Jerusalem. And insofar as the scriptures, insofar as he was looking to the resurrection of the dead, he was doing a very noble and pious thing. Mm-hmm. So there's this idea that, even after death, we can say prayers for our faithful departed, that they would receive God's mercy. And then Jesus alludes to a similar thing when he talks about the sin against the Holy Spirit in Matthew's Gospel, where he says, he alludes to sins that in a sense, he says that this sin, not in this life or in the next, basically. But that implies that there's maybe sins that could be forgiven in the next life, right? And so again, we have this idea of some type of purification that could take place. And we call that state purgatory, right? Where they are purged, they're cleaned. And we know that there's suffering that's there. Okay, so we call them the church suffering. We know that they're suffering, but the suffering is embraced in a sense because they know they're reaching the goal.
Right. Yeah.
And the pain that they feel is more a matter of for us to be complete, to be whole, is to be with God and to behold God and be caught up in the life of God. To be short of that is painful. Right. So think of yeah, man, I was right there. I was just 1/10 of a second behind the guy who took first place. That's still painful, because you were so close.
Right.
You were right there. And so that's kind of what they're going through, is that suffering that purifies them of all those loves that are less than God, so that they can enter more fully into the mystery that is God. And we sometimes don't stress this enough, that we begin to live a life of union with God now through baptism, and that we're to be caught up in the Spirit into the image of the Son to enter into those relations with the Father, Son, and the Spirit. And we'll have a more greater participation of that in heaven. But that begins, now. So we strive now to live in that, so that when we do die, we pass quickly into heaven.
Did you want to go back and ask him a question?
He answered it.
About the 3 masses? You looked confused for a second.
Oh. Okay. Well, no, I didn't look. I mean, I was I didn't know that kind of a moment. But yeah, we can talk about the 3 masses.
So a lot of this has to do with priests receive a stipend when they say Mass. So to make sure that priests don't abuse that, they're told one Mass a day. Also, when you say several Masses, and talk to any priest who does that, like on a Sunday,
Right.
they can tell you that by the third Mass or the second Mass, they're not maybe as engaged as that first one, right? So to make sure that they're really engaged in what they're doing and that they're not abusing privileges that maybe come with the Mass, they're generally limited. But on All Souls Day, because it was such an important day, they were granted to be able to say 3 Masses on that day for the souls in purgatory and for the Holy Father and different things. So that was just a privilege that was granted because it was so important to pray for the dead.
I did not know that. I thought it had to do with, I didn't know if you were allowed to have communion more than one time a day, so I thought it had something to do with that.
Well, generally speaking, you receive communion once a day. You can receive a second time if there's a particular reason why you're at that other Mass. But even then, you always want to watch what you're doing. And again, that practice is more to just make sure that it doesn't come so commonplace that you become forgetful what you're doing or unattentive, right?
Makes sense.
So a lot of times when we talk about full participation at Mass, we think, well, yeah, saying the responses and singing the songs. Yeah, that's true. But full participation means that you're actually engaged in what's going on, that you're coming forth to receive worthily Holy Communion, and that you recognize who it is you're receiving, and that you spend some time really just with that divine guest in your heart, right?
No, you cannot have him on your other show. Although I am now really reconsidering giving him a video show because I think we can.
I know.
I can.
I
ride
have
him into
another
the-
like
No,
thing
the
I want
last
to
time
share.
I did a video with you, you're like, no, it's really weird how you keep staring at the camera. It's freaking me out, man.
We'll hide the cameras. So in addition, we wanted to talk about the saints,
Right.
and we wanted to talk about the souls, and that kind of leads us into the third thing we wanted to talk about, which was burying the dead.
Sure.
Which has actually been broached to me on numerous occasions in the last couple of years about how confusing it can be for some people, what's allowed, what isn't allowed, and more importantly, why. The Catholic Star Herald in the month of November is going to be putting out a series of articles about the nature of burying the dead, why we do it, why there are certain restrictions in what we do and what those restrictions are for. But we wanted to have you on and kind of give us an overview of why we do what we do. Yeah.
Sure. So the first thing to remember is even in the Old Testament, we see a lot of reverence for the dead, even before the law was given, right? And even more so after the law was given. And here we're talking the law of Moses. And that is to show, number one, reverence to the Creator, that we are made in the image and likeness of God. And so we are called to be the children of God. So there's something special about us, we might say. So we show great reverence to God by how we treat our bodies. When we come to the New Testament, we remember that, well, by baptism, we've been filled with the Holy Spirit, so that St. Paul says, we're temples of the Spirit. He writes this in Corinthians, 1 Corinthians. We are the temples of the Holy Spirit, which means that we've become holy, right? Our very body, like we need to always remember, the human person is a composite of body and soul. I'm only fully me, or really me, when my soul and my body are together. And as such, my body makes a big part of who I am. So it's not just my soul that becomes holy by baptism. It's my body that becomes holy as well, right? And so because it becomes a holy, sacred thing, you treat it with respect.
Yeah.
Right? And one author somewhere wrote once, how we treat the dead says a lot about how we treat the living. Right? And if we're just kind of throwing the dead away, not taking the time to bury them or to pray for them, how do we really treat the living?
Right.
You kind of treat them in the same way, don't we?
Yeah.
Right? So we hold as the church, since the body is made holy, we treat it with reverence even when death comes. Right? The next thing we would remember is that we're looking forward to resurrection. Right? So Jesus went into the tomb, and then he came out of the tomb. And we've been told that he will return and call us forth. right? So that we too will be called forth from our tombs or from the earth and be given beautiful glorified bodies, right? So again, since we're going to get this body back, how we treat it is really important, because it reminds us that the body is integral to who I am and that my body is made for glorification in heaven. And so we just don't want to toss it aside. Mm-hmm. So there's practices. For a long time we weren't really allowed to cremate people. But then the church said, well, actually, as long as you keep the remains together and place them in a niche or a cemetery, place them in the ground, it's okay, right? And as long as you do that, that's fine. And the reason for that is when you take the human body, it'd be really, I know everybody would think it was weird if you kept your grandfather in his coffin in the closet and didn't bury him somewhere, right? But we have less of a problem thinking of the cremains that way, primarily because they're in either very decorative urn or in still another box that's in another box that can just kind of be forgotten about. So it's like out of sight, out of mind. And that's another problem that we have when we don't bury the dead properly. They become out of mind. Right? We forget to really think about them.
Yeah.
So like right now, if you drive around, you see all the Halloween displays. Someone made the news because they're rather clever. But usually you see things like headstones and coffins, right?
Right.
And you think, ooh, spooky. But you pass cemeteries on a regular basis. I think if I go the right way, I could pass two. One of them is one of ours. And you don't think anything of it. But you should think, there's dead people in there.
Yeah.
And I should remember them. I should say a prayer. So it keeps, by having that burial, it keeps their memory alive, that you would remember to pray for them, that they're still alive. And that also, we're expecting to see them again. So if we fall into certain practices where maybe we spread the ashes around, or we make jewelry and spread it around, or there's human composting that you can do that kind of can make the body, separate the body out into several different bags and put it all over the place, you kind of forget that we're made to be resurrected again, that we're going to be resurrected again, that that the body is made to join us in heaven, right? To really be whole. And we can forget that, and we can fall into certain ideas that, we're just one part of the earth and we're just going back, never to be seen again. Well, that's not our faith. Right? Our faith is that we exist as individuals, and we will exist in our bodies again in heaven, right? Or hell. Let's hope we don't go there. But these are the things that can be lost when we don't treat the body the right way. Right?
So that was kind of one of my questions is for those who may argue, dust to dust, right? So what's wrong with me spreading my loved one's ashes over the ocean? Things like that.
Well, and be careful. That could be considered, I think, toxic dumping. I do know that there's certain rules for that. Now, you could take the remains and keep them together and go so many miles out and let them sink, as long as they're together. Our concern is more that the body remains together. So that you could take... I have not seen anything that says that this is not acceptable. You could just bury somebody in the ground, as long as that's still their grave and you don't come back and disturb it and move him around or anything like that, and his body breaks back into the dust, that's acceptable. Because it's a matter of showing reverence for the body. When we start to break it apart, and we're kind of just treating it like we would treat, a wrapper or a box. It kind of gets into this idea that the body is not integral to who I am. And is just a container that I can just kind of throw in the fire and shred up or something like that. Instead of recognizing, no, my body's integral to who I am, so I want to keep it together, even if I am cremated, right? To keep those remains together. That's important.
Do you have to be buried in a if you've kept the body together and haven't been cremated, do you have to be buried in a coffin, or like for people who are very environmentally sound, like you were?
I've not seen anything that said that you cannot do a proper green burial where the body's actually placed in the ground, usually just in a shroud. Usually, with all the other regulations that would have to be followed so far down and stuff like that. I've not seen anything that you couldn't do that as long as the body's kept whole. Same thing with really technically a burial at sea in the same way. Just to say, it's not our normal thing that we would think about here in New Jersey because, and to speak of the dust dust, I do remember a science teacher when he realized one day that, wait, I'm not going to break down. I've been looking forward to going back to he was really thought that was neat. To break back down. And he wasn't saying like he wanted to be spread or anything like that. He figured, I'm going to be buried in the ground in a grave and my body will break down. And I said, no, dude. We put you in a really tight coffin and then we put you in a really tight vault. No air is getting in there unless there's like some hiccup along the way.
Yeah.
Right.
You're not really going to break down that much. And he was like really bummed out by that. But a lot of the laws about those things have to do more, I think, with just we don't think of our bodies, what they can give off and what they could, the damage that they could do. So if you look at ancient Rome, the cemeteries, like where St. Peter's Basilica is at the Vatican Hill was a cemetery. But that's actually outside the ancient walls, and for different reasons they were put out there, so it wouldn't contaminate different things and stuff like that. So you have to watch waterways and so forth. We don't think of our bodies how much toxic waste we are, I guess. Yeah. But the bigger thing with the Catholic burial practices is more a matter of showing a proper respect because we know we're going to be resurrected.
Yeah.
And certain things, cremating somebody and then spreading their ashes around, breaking them down in such a way where part of the body is thrown out or the compost and then separated, or making jewelry and things like that, just kind of it smacks of the body's not important.
Yeah.
And I can just kind of toss it away, or I just kind of become one with the universe, right? Well, we don't become one with the universe. Right? We're going to become one with God, and we're going to do that in our bodies eventually, right? So we treat our bodies because we're going to get it back, right?
And for those of you who might be listening and going, wait, what did he just say? We were referring to cremains, like cremated remains. That sort of come together as one word, but it's actually become a problem over the years, and one that South Jersey Catholic Cemeteries is actually addressed from time to time with special masses. You would be shocked to find out how many people have had someone cremated, put in an urn, left in a house, and then they move out of the house and leave the urn, or they die in the house and someone has to find the urn, and then that they don't know what to do with this. Right. I mean, found urns absolutely happened. So what Catholic charity or at the Catholic cemeteries in South Jersey actually does is every couple of year or two, they'll have a special mass where people can bring their urns to the mass. And then they will. There'll be a special mass of remembrance, and I've covered a couple of them. The entire front of the altar will be just not littered. It's done very nicely, but just full of urns of beautiful shapes and sizes. Some standard, some particularly intricate, some boxes where a mass of remembrance will happen, and then afterwards they'll be buried in one of our cemeteries, either put into a crypt or not a crypt, what's the word?
Mausoleum,
a niche,
or
buried in the ground. And it's lovely, and it actually gives them. That's the proper way of handling cremated remains. Sure. Yeah, but no one has yet, to my knowledge, found Grandpa in a closet whole and asked for that service. But you never know.
Right. It's usually cremains that they find.
Yeah. Very rarely is it Grandpa in the backyard. Right. Although if you go to dig up my parents' backyard, it will be littered with dead dogs, and a few cats everywhere. Most of them are pets. Yeah. But sometimes Dad's just out there with a gun. No, my dad's a saint. True. He would never do that.
So for everybody who's going to be picking up the next Catholic Star Herald, we have a article by Father Rox that's discussing this very topic in depth. So I encourage everybody to pick that up. Father, in your article, you talked about two ways of disposing the body, which is contrary to our faith. And I think we kind of already talked about human composting a little and why not, but you mentioned alkaline hydrolysis. What is that?
Alkaline hydrolysis is a way of disposing the body, they put the body in a vat of alkaline and water, and then they seal the vat, put it under heat and high pressure, and within a matter of hours, the bodily fat and some of your other looser or thinner muscle, bone tissue, just kind of fades away. It becomes a big slop. And then they take the bones and they pulverize them, and they might give them to the family. And then the sludge that's left over is dealt with in several different ways depending from where you're at. It can literally be poured down the drain in some places. And again, this is akin to scattering of the ashes, but also just like the whole body is what's going to be resurrected, and we should treat our loved ones a little bit better. It's not yet, as far as I know, legal in New Jersey or permitted, but it could eventually get there, and it's in a few states maybe, but it's the type of thing where the popularity could grow if they really get it going. Human composting, I don't think that's in the state yet either, but that's probably coming. I do know there are some things before the state legislature that could, because they would get into regulating how you do these things.
Sure.
So that's not quite yet. And again, that's kind of sold as it's a green way of going. And again, they do a similar thing with that. Your body's put in a pan, in a sense, I guess we could say, covered with bacteria and some soil and some other plant stuff. And again, there's some high heat and moisture to help it break down quicker. And then that's shifted out. Then there's different ways to do it. Some they kind of shift through the body. They kind of shake out certain parts that they just know aren't breaking down, and they get rid of them. So it's all different places, different things. Again, it's just that let's show proper respect for the body, and that's a lot different than Uncle always wanted to be just buried in a shroud in the mountain, and we did that. But we know where his grave is, and we don't come back and disturb that, and we just let the body break down over time. It's a lot different than this.
Yeah, so, it sounds.
It's kind of the USCCB had to put out a document about it to warn us and to tell us just to be careful of that.
Yeah. By the way, I know you looked shocked about the alkaline disposal.
I've never heard. I don't understand
Obviously,
the reason for it.
You did not watch Breaking Bad when that was on. That's always how they got rid of the bodies was
right.
Stuff like that.
That's the type of thing. Yeah.
Huh.
So it's very gangster.
I just don't understand the purpose of that. Is that supposed to be green as well?
I don't know if that's green. I think it's cheaper.
Yeah.
Because
you don't need to create a kiln and
right.
Yeah.
It's just, I think, all of this really just goes back to what you were saying at the beginning of the respect for one's body and how we are soul, body and soul. Mm-hmm. And, I think that also is something good to remember in our living years, that I always wonder, I think I've even asked you this, Mike, we need to have a article or series about taking care of our bodies. I'm not just working out or eating healthy because it's God's body too.
Sure.
And so Mike's giving me a horrible look.
I feel like
do you know I bake every night?
There's the baking thing and exercise.
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about.
Listen, God is also a believer in joy and happiness. So, but I respect everything in moderation.
And we do need to remember. I know there's when we look at the Holy Father's put out 2 encyclicals about caring for the planet Earth and things like that. But we do need to remember we were given that task to be caretakers of creation, and not to abuse it and to treat it properly, and that includes how we treat our bodies, and how we treat one another. So again, if we go back to the saints, and the saints lived out the gifts of the Spirit, one of the gifts is piety or reverence. That reverence isn't just a matter of reverence towards religious objects and things like that. That also leads to a reverence towards how I treat others.
Yeah.
Right.
Because I begin to recognize, wait, I'm in the image and likeness of God. The other person's in the image and likeness of God. I'm beloved by God, they are too. I'm called to love them and respect them in a similar way, right?
Well, Father Rox, thank you so very much for being on the podcast today. We really appreciate that, and we cannot wait to have you back in a couple of weeks.
That's going to be exciting. It's going to be so exciting.
Thank you, Father
Can't
Rox.
wait.
See you, everybody. Talk to you again next week.